Okay, hi and welcome to another installment of Math Basics with Mr. Besh. Today we're going to use our prior knowledge and skill to simplify square roots. Again, it's all mental math. Again, no calculators whatsoever. Now, when I talk about approximating square roots, there's going to be three examples that we're going to do. We are going to take these square roots, these values underneath the radical symbol, and we are going to break this thing down. What I need to do is I need to take the square root that I see and break this into two square roots that multiply together that make 90, but one of the square roots has to be one that I know. The basics, the square root of 4, or the square root of 9, or the square root of 16, or the square root of 25, or the square root of 36. They make us think a little bit. So now, I want to break down the square root of 90. First thing that comes to mind is 9 times 10, because I know what the square root of 9 is. Now, I don't know what the square root of 10 is, but I do know the square root of 9. And notice the square root that you know needs to come first in my little expression. Now, to simplify this further, the square root of 9 we know is 3. Now, in mathematics, when you multiply, you can multiply a square root times a square root. You can multiply a whole number by a whole number. But you can't multiply a whole value by a square root. It's kind of like multiplying a whole value by a variable. If you took 3 times a, you get 3a. You put them side by side. Well, the same thing works when I'm doing square roots. Because I know the square root of 9 is 3, 3 times the square root of 10 stays 3 square roots of 10. That's how we read that, okay? We take the whole value, which is 3, and we put it directly in front of the radical symbol and keep it as 3 square roots of 10. The reason why 10 doesn't break down any further is because I can think of nothing that multiplies together that make 10, yet one of the numbers has to be a perfect square root that I know. And this is our answer in simplified form. And this is the first of 3 examples. The second, sometimes they can give us an expression like the last answer that I just had. This means 3 times the square root of 8. So now the key is to break down the square root of 8. Again, think of 2 values that multiply together to make 8, but one's a square root that I know. So when I do this and I simplify, 4 times 2 makes 8, and I know the square root of 4. Now, reading this across my expression from left to right, this means 3 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. Now, I know what the square root of 4 is. It's a whole value. It's 2. So when I simplify this, this is just going to basically give me 3 times 2, which makes 6. And because I can't break down the square root of 2, it stays in the radical symbol. And when I multiply them together, I put them together like as is. And that gives me 6 square roots of 2. And this is my simplified answer for 3 square roots of 8. The last example I have, done exactly the same way. Now I have 2 expressions on either side being multiplied. 2 square roots of 3 times 4 square roots of 6. Now remember, you can multiply a whole number times a whole number. You can multiply a square root times a square root, but you cannot multiply a number times a square root. Now when I do this problem, my first step here is going to be simply this. 2 times 4 out front multiply together to make 8. 3 times 6 underneath the radical symbols multiply together to make square root of 18. Now, I need to simplify the square root of 18. I need to think about 2 values that multiply together to make 18, yet one of them is a value that I know. That's a square root that simplifies to a whole value. And I can think of that. The square root of 18 breaks down into the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. And I know the square root of 9, so when I read this from left to right, this means 8 times the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. So 8 times 3 is going to be 24, and the square root of 2, again, cannot be simplified any further. So my answer is going to be 24 square roots of 2. And this is it. This is how you simplify square root expressions. Sometimes, remember, there might be a square root expression you can't break down. But if there is, this is the technique that you use, and this is how you do it. I hope you found this lesson both helpful and informative.